Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo. It's Sunday, and we're once again back here in Star Citizen hanging out in the hangar module. And today we're not going to talk about any fancy ships. As you can see here, we just have my good old Aurora, as well as my Avenger. But we're going to talk about racing. And you guys are probably saying to Tony, why didn't you put the 350R? Or where's the, why don't we talk about the M50? And those ships are all great. They're very fast, and I'm sure they will be wonderful at racing, especially on the actual planet that is based around racing that we know about. They'll probably have plenty of really cool, races inside of the planet, maybe even like arena-type races. It's definitely going to be awesome, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm a big fan of racing in general, whether it be in, racing simulators like the Forza series or the Gran Turismo series, off-road racing games, whatever you call it. I've always enjoyed racing, and racing in ships, to me, would just be, that's even better. That's something you don't really often get to do. A lot of those games have sort of died out, those old genres like F-Zero and things of that nature. Not to mention that they were really never actual space racing games. They were more of like hover ship racing games. So instead of Star Citizen, we're going to have the opportunity to actually race spaceships. And that is really, really cool. And again, as I said, we do have that planet dedicated to it, and I'm sure that the 350R and ships like the M50 will be very good at those things. But that's not to say that we may not see a different type of racing. I'm not sure if this is actually going to be in the game, but even if it's not, it's something that I would like to personally do, possibly with the organization or other people who would like to get involved, and that is the idea of actual long-distance endurance races. Sort of like the Baja 1000 for space, the Verse 300, or something like that. And at that point, you're going to need different ships because you're talking about long-distance racing now. You're not talking about short races, engines with a lot of power. You're talking about a combination of speed, power, as well as large fuel capacity, the ability to go longer on one tank of fuel. And I actually think the Avenger is a pretty good ship for that. It has the two actual extra fuel pods where you can put extra fuel aboard, and it's no slouch in the speed department. We know it's going to be relatively quick, and I think it would make a really great sort of long-distance racing ship. Now, we really don't know too much how all of the different universes and things are going to come together. We know there are going to be jump points and things of this nature, and we're really not too sure on the scale yet. At least I can't comprehend it from what they've talked about. But if I remember correctly, they did mention that, traveling between some of these systems or exploring these certain jump points could actually take weeks upon, multiple weeks possibly even, to explore them fully, to actually travel in real time to all these places. They really want to make it a very large world. And that's where I think the idea of these endurance races coming in would be very, very cool. Now, of course, you might be saying to yourself, well, what are you going to race for a week? Who's going to stay awake for an entire week and play the game? Well, you would actually do it on an organized time-based system, something like you might see in the Cannonball Run or the Targa Tasmania rally. These are rallies that are based on time. So you could actually do that in game technically by having players actually check in like a timestamp in game for their time. You would have the race start at the same time, of course. Everyone would get on, the race would start, and you would then race to, from whatever point to the next point. So there would be small spurts that you would do, so it would be reasonable for everyone to be able to participate in the race. Maybe the first leg of the race would be, 20 to 30 minutes. Something reasonable where one person could sit down on a normal play session and actually, do that part of the race. Then they would, once they got to that point, they would stop. Their time would be checked in, and they would record their time, and they would keep it, or they would send it to whoever the organizer of the race was. Perhaps maybe if I was to organize this race, I would have those people all send me their time. I'd write down the times for the first day, have a leaderboard right here in my room, set up the times for the day, and then the next leg would happen the next day, or whenever we could schedule it so everyone could still be involved in it. Of course, it would be something you'd have to be dedicated to take part in. It wouldn't be something where, you could just be like, oh, I'll be there for the one race and not the other race. I mean, you could do that, but you would probably end up losing. But hey, that's also the fun of those sorts of races. It's not always about winning, it's about that personal achievement. So maybe you might enjoy, being behind and seeing if you could actually catch up in time somewhat by having a better run. I'm just very interested in the idea of these sort of endurance-based races, these sort of rallies, I guess you could say. They're something I actually enjoy watching quite a bit in real life. I would love to take part in something like the Targa Tasmania. They're a dying breed of race. Not a lot of places allow them to be held simply because they are actually driven through real towns, real roads, and real places, and it's going to be interesting to see how that works out inside of Star Citizen, because when you start thinking about doing races like this, in the game endurance races, there's a possibility that you will pass through systems that have speed limits maybe, and in something like an endurance race in real life, you generally do have to maintain the speed limit if there isn't some sort of law enforcement saying, okay, no, it's fine, we're going to close down the roads. So that would add a whole nother aspect of actually, maybe knowing better routes to get to a certain destination, knowing the star map, knowing how to navigate through the different things, and again, using that to your advantage to win. It's all a very gray area. We know nothing about it, but the idea of it and speculating on it puts a pretty big smile on my face. I really do like that whole aspect, the racing aspect of things, and what that could actually lead to. It's interesting how many ships in the game have, again, multi-purposes, because when you think of this endurance race thing, I think of several ships that could probably compete in it without any trouble. And on top of all of that, you could actually run classes. So you could have like a racing class, full-on racing class where something like the M50, the 350R, and what other ships we happen to see in the future can compete amongst each other to have it fair. That's exactly how these sorts of rallies work in the real world. There's things like classic, you have modified, you have like super, hypercar. So all the different assortments of vehicles and their performance levels are pitted once against one another. And then of course you can also have, the idea of those classes then competing with each other. So while they would compete in their own bracket, you'd have things like maybe the Avenger or even the Explorer variant of the Hornet competing somewhat in the same class, 2 ships, not extremely quick, but still pretty quick, decent fuel capacity. But at the same time, when it all comes down to it and the race is over, there's a chance that those classes could actually outrun, the M50 or the 350R, and then you would have a whole separate bracket for it. There's so much that could go into it, and it's something I really want to do in the future, especially if we have a lot of people involved in the organization who are into racing. And again, you don't need to have just the racing ship. That is the whole aspect of this. Hell, you could even have a class for the Corvette type ships, for the larger ships. Things like the Idris, class for large ships like the Idris, class for ships like the Constellation, the Cutlass. There's so many things you could do so everyone can compete in whatever ship they're most comfortable flying in, because again, it's an endurance race. This isn't, a typical closed course arena race. It's not about how many laps you finish in as quick a time. It's about knowing your destination, being able to actually get there on time. Hell, maybe we'd even have core parts of the race run through Vandal territory. I mean, how cool would that be? Actually run through a place where now you have to be very smart about how you navigate through that area, because there's a good chance there'll be Vandals trying to kill you. To be like pod racing in Star Wars when the Sand People showed up and started shooting at the pod racers. I think there's a lot of potential there for some really cool, group interaction in the organization, and just for everybody in the universe. Holding races like this would be a very, very cool thing. It's something I'm looking forward to seeing how we can do, I guess you could say, because again, we don't know too much about how everything's going to work out just yet. And when it all comes together, if this is something we can do, I will definitely be doing it. So let me know your thoughts, guys. What do you think of the idea of these sort of endurance-based races, where you have these separate legs that you're doing each day? Everyone shows up, races a certain section, records their time, next section. Hell, you can make this like a week to month-long event, where it's just this really long thing. So, I mean, the fighting that would go on between, some of the different ranks, you could have a couple people fighting for first, couple people fighting for like 20th, and it would be intense, it would be fantastic. And hell, maybe even multi-person crews running the races, one person who is the sort of co-driver, telling the guy where to go in a multi-ship, like, hey, okay, we need to get off here, we gotta hit this jump point. The potential, man, has me grinning ear to ear. So let me know your thoughts on the whole concept, guys, if this is something that you would personally be interested in taking part in. And also, if you would, what ship class would you like to run in? Would you run full racing? Would you run something like the Avenger, maybe even the Cutlass? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.